Hey YouTube, how you guys doing today? My beard is gray and my name is Trey. In today's episode of the AWS Cloud Quest series, we will be talking about APIs with database, right? And if you saw the last video, right, we will be using some of the same services. We'll be using API Gateway, and we will also be using DynamoDB. All right, we are 92% done with our Solutions Architect role. So hip, hip, hooray for Trey and hooray for everyone who has joined me on this journey, right? So we're that much closer to earning our badge. And when I look up here in my box, I see I only have one more to go. So hopefully it don't surprise me with another one, all right? Because I'm tired. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so now we can go ahead and navigate to our solution. If this is your first time joining us, right? Go ahead and click like on the video, subscribe to the channel, right? So you can get the notifications as soon as I drop a video, and always share with other people who are interested in starting a career or starting their journey in cloud computing, right? This is an introduction cloud computing for beginners type of course, okay? All right, so here we go. So we are meeting with our customer for the first time. Hi there, I hope you can help. I am working on a vehicle rental app for our amusement park visitors, and we have an urgent situation. That's what I'm here for. What's the problem? Did you see the advertisements around the city about the park's grand opening? I did. The entire city is buzzing with anticipation. I know, and that's where my technical nightmare begins. Let me explain the situation. The backend for the app is powered by a relational SQL database. Our stress tests reveal that the database can handle only a limited number of concurrent users. We can't currently afford to upgrade the database hardware to meet the increased performance demands. I'm trying to remain calm, but I'm concerned about meeting our grand opening deadline. Yeah, that would be bad. Why don't you try Amazon DynamoDB instead? Amazon DynamoDB, is that a relational database? DynamoDB is a NoSQL database that brings several advantages over relational databases. For this type of workload, it delivers consistent single-digit millisecond response time at any scale. Yes, this is the type of performance we need. My team has never used a NoSQL database before. Can you set up a simple DynamoDB demo? Sure, we'll also need to create an AWS Lambda function to store the vehicle info in the DynamoDB table. How do we access the Lambda function that you create to perform a stress test on the database? Good question. We need to provide access to the business logic within the Lambda function by using Amazon API Gateway. Great. We already have some experience with API Gateway from the previous project you helped us on. We can use your example to update our rideshare app before the grand opening. Will you help us integrate Amazon DynamoDB into our vehicle rental application? I accept, we accept, let's go. Thank you for helping. All right, so as we've done in all the rest of the videos, right? This is our solutions diagram, okay? I'm not gonna spend too much time on it, just gonna orient anyone that has not seen this before. If you wanna learn more about the services, right, all you have to do is click on one of these video boxes, either here or here, to learn about the specific service. In this solution, as you can see, there are a lot of videos, right? Basically kind of describing DynamoDB for those that are not familiar with databases. And also you see they are describing, what is SQL, structured query language, versus no SQL, like when you do not have a particular schema in your database, okay? All right, so this is the diagram that is laid out. Kind of talks about like how each service integrates. I will spare all of you that, right? And just go on to our plan here. So these are our practice lab goals. You see how everything is kind of like tinted, right? So if I click on the little eye symbol right here, then this is that half of the practice lab goals, right? So in the practice lab goals, what AWS is going to walk us through by step guided learning is going to be create a DynamoDB table, define the table schema, right? create an AWS Lambda function to create, update, and query table items, expose an Amazon API gateway RESTful API to the Lambda function. And then if I highlight the second part, right, this is what you're going to do on your own, meaning that once we go through the guided portion, we will have to do the rest on our own. We will create a new DynamoDB table called vehicles with the primary partition key ID string, right? Modify your Lambda function to reference the vehicle table. Create a new API gateway resource for vehicles. Create a post method with Lambda proxy integration and deploy the API. So if you saw the last video that I did with APIs, then this should be somewhat familiar. If not, then you can kind of stop this one, go find that video. They should be in sequential order how I did them, but just go find that video, do that first, then you can come back and do this one, okay? All right, so now, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on Start Lab and wait for the environment to come up. Wow, this is the fastest lab that I've ever done. It just came right up. All right, so the next thing you wanna always do is look for it and see if you have any associated lab files. So just like our last video, we had some sample code here that we used for for Lambda, right? It was a sample Python code. You can tell because the ending is in .py. So it's sample Python code, and that's what we use for our Lambda function. So I imagine we're going to do the same here today. So I'll go ahead and click download. That'll go to my downloads folder here. All right, and then I will just pull that up at a later time. All right, so now let's go ahead and click on our environment here and wait for our environment to come online. And then we can go back to our steps. So now we will click on step 1, step 2. First thing we will do is go open up DynamoDB. Now we should have it from our favorites from the last video, so I'll just click on it right there. It does exactly the same thing as if you typed it into the search bar. Okay, so now I'll go to step 3. So step 3 is click on create table. So I will just go ahead and click on that. Yes, you guys can see that off screen. Okay, and then for this one, it will be locations. So let me see if I can copy and paste, do old Control-C to name the database, right? Okay, I would have to type that out. For some reason, it just does not let me. You guys have seen other videos, so you know my troubles with that. All right, cool. And then for the partition key, we will type ID. So we'll go ahead and do that. OS, outstanding. Then we will scroll down. And it says scroll down to the bottom of the page. Concept behind this is DynamoDB uses primary keys to uniquely identify each item in a table and secondary indexes to provide more querying flexibility. A simple primary key composed of one attribute is known as a partition key. Okay, so just remember, right? When you hear primary partition, that's what that is. All right, so now we will scroll down to the bottom. I did not see. So if I scroll down and then click on create table, because that was not shown in the diagram. All right, got it. So now our table will be creating, okay? So now we will go on to the next step. So on the next step, what we have to do is make sure that our table, the status of our table is now active, and they want us to review that, okay? So in the table section, under status, review and wait a few seconds under your table to change to active. Go to the next step. Concept, DynamoDB uses the partition keys value to input to an internal hash function. In the table that has only a partition key, no two items can have the same partition key, right? So that's just something to always be aware of. You see that our status is now active here. Okay. Just a little warning there. Now we will go to our Lambda function, okay? And then we will go to functions, and then we will click on create functions. So remember from the last video, I had this saved in my favorites already. All right, so that's good. Then in the functions is already highlighted here, so I will go now to create function. Okay, then we will go to our next step. All right, so we will copy and paste, or we will type in lab function, right? So it's going to be LAB, capital FUN. So that's lab function. Let me double check just to make sure. F-U-N-C-T-I-O-N, lab function. All right, good. All right, and then for the runtime, we're going to use Python 3.11. So remember in our last video, for the runtime, we use Python 3-10. So here we go, Python 3-11 right there. And then we're going to open up, you see at the bottom where it says change default execution role. We're going to open up that guy. And then we're going to choose an existing role and then the lab function role. So we'll come here, click on this, use an existing role, and then it will be the lab function role. And then probably going to tell us to create function. Go to the next step, click create function, yes. And our function is called lab function, and here is the lab function. Okay, good. Okay, so now download our files, which we've already done. Okay, now on the lab function page of the AWS Lambda console, scroll down to the code tab. In the Lambda function code window, select highlight the code and then delete the code, paste the code from the sample code py, right? So now this is the time where I'm gonna do this off screen, okay? Okay, so this is the Python source code that I just downloaded, right? I can show you what it looks like. Pulls up in Microsoft VS Code. That's the name of this text editor, that visual code right here, okay? So I am gonna copy and paste. I'm gonna do a Control A, then I'm gonna do a Control C, right? And then I'm gonna paste that into my Lambda editor, okay? Right there. All right, cool. Now let me bring this guy down, close this guy out right here. All right, good. So now I'm gonna do that. So now let me go back here. Okay, so Lambda function code window, select the code, then delete the code, paste the code from the sample file that you downloaded in the earlier step. Yes, yes, yes. Click deploy and then go to the next step. So we will click on, now that we have our code here and it's set, we will click deploy, and then that will make our code active. Okay, that's the whole purpose of us doing this right now. Okay, so that makes our code active. Once we deploy our code, then we will go to the next step. All right, now select, highlight, and copy the code on lines 104 to 110. Okay, so we will copy from 104 to 110. All right, so we'll copy that. And then, okay, there's a few steps. So let's go. So from 104 to 110. So right here. So we will copy this. So I'm using a Windows, so I'm going to do a Control C right there, okay? All right, so now we'll go to the next step. And then the next step will be to create an event. So in the pop-up box for the event name, okay, so to create an event, right? So I don't see it, it's not really like laid out right here. So what we'll do is we'll come here and then just configure test events. So that's what you would need to do. So you'll click on configure test event and then this pop-up window will pop up, okay? So now you go and the event name is gonna be location. All right, so location. All right, cool. Type that up. All right, got it. And then review, make sure it's private. You don't share it with anyone. All right, and then what we're gonna do is paste. So I see for event JSON, paste the code segment that you copied, and we're leaving the template as hello world, and then click on format JSON. Okay, so private. We're gonna get rid of this. We're gonna copy and paste those lines from 104 to 110. That's what it looks like. And then we're going to format it as JSON, right? To make sure that the indentation and everything like that is properly formatted, right? Then we're going to come down, scroll down to step 5, and then we're going to click on save. All right, so I did it off screen, but we just scroll down to the bottom, big orange button that says save, and then go ahead and click on that. All right. So now, when we go to the next step, okay, now we're going to test our actual function. So on the code source navigation bar, click test, then go to the next step. So the code step navigation bar, we're going to click test, bam, and then you see the response that we have, okay, is that code that we put in from from line 104 to 110, okay. All right, so now we go to the next step, review, make sure it says the same thing. All right, we did that. Okay, got it. Now we're going to open up DynamoDB again. So we'll go to DynamoDB, click step 2. All right, then once we do that, go to tables and then click on locations, okay, the locations tab. So we go to DynamoDB, make sure that tables is selected, and then click on locations, okay. All right, so now when we go to that step right there, we'll close out this box first, and then we'll go to explore table items. Close out that box, go to explore table items, okay. Then we want to review the items that are returned. So when we come down here, we see these are the returned items. Let me get rid of this so you can see it. As you see, these are the return items here. So you got ID string, true, yes, and then the type is scooter, okay? All right, so now going to our next step, API, we're gonna open up API gateway. As you see from yesterday, we still had it saved in the favorites, or I said yesterday, but from the last video, right? All right, cool, which was yesterday, by the way. All right, so then we scroll down and then we're gonna build a REST API, right? We're gonna build a REST API and make sure it's not the one that says private, but just a regular REST API. Then we're gonna build and then new API, build new API, and then the API name is do it yourself API, and then click create API, DIY API. So we'll go to API, we'll go to REST API, we'll build, and then once we build, should be yes, new API. Looks like I have an older experiences available. Try out our new console. Okay, yes. So that's what it was. So I just had to switch it to the new console. I was like, hey, that looks kind of old right there. All right, cool. So now REST API build. Okay, and now we go to new API. We're going to create a REST API. And I think it was called something DIY. So DIY-API. Okay, so we'll type it in. DIY-API. Okay, and then we'll go to create API, and now that API has been created, okay? And then congratulations, we've already come to the end of the step-by-step portion, the step-by-step section, all right? That was fairly quick, right, compared to some of the other videos we've done. So now we're gonna go into the do-it-yourself section, right, the DIY section. Okay, so now step by step. So starting with the first one, create a new DynamoDB table called vehicles with the primary partition key ID string. All right, so now let's go back to DynamoDB. And we're going to create table. And this table is going to be called vehicles. All right. ID, partition key with the ID string. Let me double check, make sure that's good. Primary partition key, ID string, good. And then we just come down here to create table, okay? There we go, there we have it. So the vehicles table is creating. Let's go to the next step. Now modify your Lambda function to reference the vehicle table. All right, so now we gotta come back over here to Lambda, and then come to our lab function, right? And then take a look at our source code. So now let's get rid of that. Go back to the Lambda function. This is the source code. And we have to find within that source code, right here. Yes, table name. So this is a variable that is set to send, you know, to execute the code to this specific DynamoDB table. Right there, it sent it to that locations table, as you see that was created. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this vehicles. What was that? Oh, okay, I got it. All right, got it. So now we know that now the traffic should go to the vehicles table within the DynamoDB database. All right, so modify your Lambda function to reference the vehicles, and I probably want to save that or deploy that. So now let me deploy that, right? So just to make sure, okay, now I know, hey, those changes have been deployed and those changes have been added. Okay, good. All right, so now create a new API gateway resource for vehicles. Okay, so we're going to create a new API gateway vehicle for resource. So did he say create a new one, right? Create a new API gateway resource or resource, all right? So I can come over here to the DIY API and then create resource, and then the resource path. My resource name is going to be, I think, vehicles, right? Vehicles. There we go. And then create resource. All right, so now I have created a resource. Create a post method with Lambda proxy integration. Okay, so create a post method this time as opposed to on our last video where we created a get method, right? So now we need to go to API. So let me see. If I came here, it's supposed to be API action. Let's see. Or did I do that correctly? Maybe I didn't do that correctly. Let me go back to APIs here. Create a new API resource for vehicles. Create API. Create resource. I did, okay. Create a resource. Something is not right. Oh, sorry. Create method. Method. And then it's going to be post method because this is the new console. That's what it was. All right, got it. And then Lambda function. Yes. Choose a Lambda function, and our function is lab function, right? And we want to Lambda proxy integration, so we want to make sure that that box is checked. Okay, and then we create a method here. So creating a post method, that is done. So now we need to do some testing here. How do we, this is the new, you know what? Let me see if I can, because now I'm a little confused about, okay, got it. So I want to try right here. I'm going to do use old console. As you see, I come down here because that's how I did it yesterday. So I don't want to lose track. So you can always switch between the new and the old console just for everybody's like reference. So right here, you see I have the test. That's what I was looking for. When I saw the other one, I got confused. I was like, what's happening, man? All right, got it. So I'll just run kind of like a end-to-end test here. Let's see, hold up. Create a post method with Lambda. Hold up, solution validation process. Your API endpoint will receive a post call with the following JSON objects. Okay, so it's a post, it's not a get. All right, so now let me see, do a control C on that guy right there. And then in the request body, let me put that right there. All right, and then let me do a test. Okay. I don't think that's right. Response headers, application JSON, trace ID. It says status 200, but I don't. Response body came back as null, which is not good. Let me see. Oh, deploy the API. Duh. All right, got it. So here we come. Deploy API. Let's deploy our API first. Deployment stage, we'll go with, this is a new stage, and we'll call this We'll just call this DIY API. That's our deployment stage, right? DIY API, stage description, complete, and then deployment for, and then CX. CX is an abbreviation for customer, okay? So there we go. So let's deploy that. All right, cool. This is our URL here. All right. Let's go back here. Let's go here. Okay, this is our URL. All right, got it. So this is the URL that we have. I want to see if I could. Let's see. I believe we might be good. Let me copy and paste this URL here. I tried to get to where I could test it again before, but let me just see if it works. So here we go. And then our table is going to be called vehicles. That's the table that we created. It should be complete now. So now let's validate this and see if everything works out. The API was involved, but no record was created in the DynamoDB table. So now let's go back to DynamoDB. And check out our tables real quick. So I see this is the vehicles. And let me see, explore table items. Items returned, 0. Let me see. So scan query. Oh, run, enter partition key value, which is the ID. That is the partition key value, correct? For vehicles. Partition key. Let me see. 1. Let me see. See if I can do that. 1. See what happens. Complete. No items returned. Create item. ID partition key value is, what was that? What was that? Bike. Let's see. Bike, create item. It shouldn't be that though. Nah, it should be what we invoke with the API. Let me delete this. Let's go back to API gateway real quick. All right, so we got the DIY API. We got the post. There we go. Now we want to test it. So if I just say test, okay, internal service error. So now, because we're doing a post, now let me see if I can copy this right here to give it the necessary information. Control C. Okay. Put this in the request body. Okay. Then let me do a test. Still response body is still doing the same thing. Let's go back to Lambda. Let's go back to Lambda real quick. Let's do a test. There we go. That's what's happening. So the problem is with the Lambda function. So now, what did we do that first time? The first time we copied and pasted 104, right? So let's try this. Let's try this. Just try to do it the same way we did it the first time. Configure test event, create new test event. This test event will be called DIY-API. Okay. The location, nope. Last time we used, I guess it wouldn't matter, but let's just do the same thing we did. So we did the hello world. Okay. Then I can get rid of this, do a control C to this guy right here, format it in JSON, make sure that that's good to go. All right. And now test. Oh, well, hold up, bro. Why did it not save? Why did it not deploy? The test DIY API was saved, but let me see something, man. Oh, right here. That's not right. Vehicles. See how I had a misspelling right there, right? It could just be one little thing. You always got to look. You always have to look and check, man. Everything. It could be one little typo. Well, we in the IT world, we call that a fat finger. See how fat these fingers is? It could be one little fat finger that mess up everything. All right. Back on track, Trey. So now, let's go here to API. Back to the do-it-yourself API. Now we want to get that test, because that test is going to give us the validation. All right, so when we come over to test it out, right, we'll come and grab our response body again. Let's go ahead and grab that stuff there. Do a control C. Okay. A request body. All right, let's do a test. Okay, and now you see within our response body, we have the correct information now. So now we should be good to go. So now if let me see, deploy, correct it. Let me see if this works or if I have to do another one. Let me see, correct it. All right, got it. So this is the new one. Why is not, okay, got it. I got you. I think. Okay. So I see that when I copied it, this is not necessary, but let me just see something here. And I should do a / shoot. What was that? API. And then do a / and what was it? Vehicles, right? Vehicles. Yes. / vehicles. And then now, let me see. It's not going to do that because it's not a get, it's a post. So it's not a get information. It's post. So now let me see. Let me just get rid of all this. Let me get a delete here. I'm looking for, sometimes, man, like I switch, like when I work on a Mac, and then I use a Windows in my like everyday life, so I get confused on where the keys is. Click like on the video or comment if you have that same issue, that same problem. Okay, got it. Hey, looks like we figured it out. We did it, okay? So just remember, like those typos that I made, that's what kind of threw the whole thing off, right? And didn't allow everything to validate. But you see now that we're good, let's go ahead and give the customer the great news, right? So now we'll come here. Wow, thank you so much. The performance metrics from your test DynamoDB table look great. Awesome. I think your app will perform just fine during the big event. We are very excited about your solution. Choose your reward. Oh, what's this, like one of them big pools that people slide on? Let's go ahead and grab one of them, bro. We too old for this stuff, man. Once you get past like second grade, you know what I'm saying? All right, that's real cool. People can slide down this thing, and that's cool right there, man. That's dope. All right, so hey, you see we have created our solution. We're good to go. All right. And let's see what this does for our status of the game. Oh, it says I got one more to do. Wow, man, they just keep throwing stuff at me, man. Single page app. All right, so hey, it seems like we got one more one more video to do, which is single page app, and then we'll be done. But hey, I hope that you guys learned something today. And then always remember, like, you know, when you're doing stuff, especially when you're doing it by hand, you have to be very, very careful, and you have to always be able to pay attention to detail, right? I do these videos live in front of y'all. I don't practice them. You've heard me say that. For those of y'all that watch multiple videos, you've heard me say that like a bunch of times, right? I just do it. So today I ran into an issue where I kind of had to go back and kind of figure some things out. But just remember, like, always pay attention to what you're doing, okay? Because that could save you a lot of time. All right, so hey, thank everyone for joining me today, and I'll see you in my next video. And hopefully this will be the last video.